The pygmy hippo of West Africa was hidden away for years, but everyone now knows what it is because of the internet sensation Mudang that has gone viral. But before that, this animal was first described in 1849, but the handful of these animals that were captured were quietly kept in private labs. Now, scientists studied them behind closed doors, uncertain whether to classify them as true hippos or some freakish dwarf subspecies. For decades, the species was hidden in private zoological records until a live specimen reached a European zoo in 1912. Today, these hippos are endangered but well known. Now, for decades, they were literally animals locked away by scientists, unwilling to reveal their existence until more evidence piled up. Now, experts believe that there are fewer than 3,000 of them left in the wild. Mudang is at a zoo in Thailand, and she reached popularity from funny videos of her showing attitude and being rude to her workers. Now, she's so popular that over 69,000 fans visited the zoo on July 10th, 2025 to celebrate her first birthday. Now, it's a good thing that we now know about these hippos and we can help protect them. In 1992, scientists at Laos stumbled upon horns of an animal no one had ever seen before. These long, straight, almost parallel horns didn't match any known species. So they did tests, and DNA and skeletal studies revealed that it belonged to an entirely new species of antelope-like creature. But here's the eerie part. Most of what we know about this animal came from confiscated remains locked away in labs. Now, live sightings are so rare they're almost mythical, and for years, researchers only spoke about it in scientific papers. It's dubbed the Asian unicorn because it's so rarely seen. Now, some villagers claim scientists discouraged public reporting so poachers wouldn't target it, and for decades the saola was hidden in specimen drawers and freezers, its existence known only to a handful of biologists before it started venturing into the world. Most evidence now comes from camera traps, footprints, and remains. Some field teams have even spent months in saola territory and never glimpsed a single one. That's how hidden this animal still is. Now, sailors had been talking about krakens for centuries, but every time a giant squid washed ashore, scientists tended to quietly collect it and stash it in a museum basement. Now, in the 1800s, specimens were stored away in Paris, London, and Copenhagen, often misidentified or simply cataloged without making a big deal of it. But some people were convinced that they existed, they just didn't have any proof. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that researchers began openly studying them. You see, the giant squid wasn't even photographed alive until 2004, and wasn't filmed until several years later when it was caught at the surface. Now, underwater video was not accomplished until 2012. But scientists have learned virtually nothing about the lives of these deep-sea giants, not even how big they get, although some estimates predict they grow up to 66 feet. For generations, these monsters of the deep were effectively locked away from public imagination by cautious scientists who didn't want to validate a sea monster story. Now, pandas were another animal that was kept a secret. When Western explorers first heard stories from rural China about a strange white and black bear cat living in remote bamboo forests, no one believed it, and they just thought it was folklore. Now, local hunters brought back skins in the late 1800s, but these specimens were kept tightly controlled by Chinese officials and scientists. For decades, only a few researchers had access, and it wasn't until the early 20th century that the giant panda was formally revealed to the world, which is actually pretty crazy if you think about it. In fact, the first live panda wasn't seen by the Western world until 1936, when Ruth Harkness smuggled one cub, Su Lin, out of China. Until then, this now iconic species was essentially locked away behind government secrecy and limited scientific access. And let me say though, I am glad we can see them now because they are just so cute. Okay, so we all know what a platypus is, right? It's like a duck-beaver creature. Now, they're weird creatures, and when the first preserved platypus specimens arrived in Britain in the late 1700s, naturalists assumed they were fakes. Literally, people thought they were fake, just taxidermy tricks stitched together from a duck, an otter, and a beaver. Now, it naturally excites the idea of some deceptive preparation by artificial means. Zoologist George Shaw wrote in the first scientific description of the platypus, published in 1799. Now, for a while, no one took these creatures seriously, and they kept them locked away. It wasn't until live animals were observed and dissected that scientists accepted this weird Frankenstein-like mammal being real. Now, one of the most remarkable and weird aspects of the platypus is their ability to lay eggs, and it wasn't discovered for another 100 years. This creature is just strange overall, and I can honestly see why people didn't believe it was real. If you're scared of bees, watch out, because this is the largest bee in the world. Wallace's giant bee is 4 times bigger than a honeybee, with massive mandibles that look like bolt cutters. Now, it was first discovered in Indonesia in 1859 by Alfred Russel Wallace himself. Hence the name. Now, scientists were so astonished by its size, but after 1981, it disappeared completely, and for nearly 4 decades, scientists assumed it had gone extinct, which honestly seemed plausible. But back in 2019, an expedition team found one alive in the Maluku Islands, buzzing out of a termite mound high in a tree. The people who discovered this must have been freaking out. Now, the rediscovery made headlines around the world because it wasn't just a scientific win, as it was proof that even large, seemingly conspicuous creatures can vanish for decades and then suddenly just return. Now, there was also a time where humans denied that gorillas existed. And yes, you heard that right. Until the mid-1800s, Western science denied gorillas existed, even though African communities described them for centuries. The few skulls and skins collected were kept in European museums, but instead of revealing them to the public, they were either dismissed as exaggerated chimpanzees or locked away in private collections. Early explorers like Paul de Chaillu were mocked when he described giant human-like apes in Africa. Now, he claimed to have hunted several gorillas, as he brought back skins, skulls, and even complete specimens. When he presented them in Europe in 1859, the reaction was insane, as newspapers sensationalized them as monsters, and scientists were stunned that such a large ape had been kept a secret. Now, some accused Paul of exaggerating and even faking the whole thing until the specimens were verified. His accounts of gorillas beating their chests and roaring in the jungle fueled their terrifying reputation. Now, by the late 19th century, gorillas were finally recognized as real. But for decades, gorillas existed in this limbo, well known to African communities, yet treated as a myth or quietly shelved in Western museums. For millions of years, the coelacanth fish was only known from fossils. Paleontologists confidently taught that it had gone extinct 65 million years ago with the dinosaurs. But in 1938, a South African trawler hauled one up alive. Now, the fish was so bizarre, with lobe-like fins and a prehistoric look, that scientists at first downplayed the discovery. Now, early specimens were stored in labs and museums, studied quietly while officials debated how to present the findings without sounding sensational, as everyone thought they were extinct. It was only after repeated catches in the Comoros Islands that the coelacanth's resurrection became public knowledge. For decades, it was essentially locked away in formaldehyde jars while researchers scrambled to rewrite textbooks saying that they still exist.